The co-founders of our fellowship are known to most of us simply as Bill and Bob, two anonymous alcoholics who, during their time with us, brought the gift of sobriety to millions of men and women. Bill was born in 1895 and passed away in 1971. Listen to him now as he reads, in a recording made in 1963, the opening words of the 5th chapter of Alcoholics Anonymous, affectionately known as the Big Book within the AA Fellowship.
Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose, in a general way, what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps. At some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnestness as our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. Half measures availed us nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. 6, were entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. 7, humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. 9, made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for the knowledge of his will for us, and the power to carry that out. 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. Many of us exclaimed, "What an order! I can't go through with it." Do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection.
Bob, or Dr. Bob as he was often called, was born in 1879. As a physician, he was aware that he was saying farewell to our fellowship when he opened the general meeting of the First International Convention of AA in Cleveland, Ohio, in July 1950. Only 4 months after the following talk, he died of the illness to which you will hear him refer.
My good friends in AA and of AA, I feel I would be very remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to welcome you here to Cleveland, not only to this meeting, but those that have already transpired. I hope very much that they have the presence of so many people and the words that you have heard will prove an inspiration to you, not only to you, but may you be able to impart that inspiration to the boys and girls back home who are not fortunate enough to be able to come. In other words, we hope that your visit here has been both enjoyable and profitable. I get a big thrill looking over a vast sea of faces like this with a feeling that possibly some small thing that I did a number of years ago played a small part in making this meeting possible. I also get quite a thrill when I think that we all had the same problem. We all did the same thing. We all got the same results in proportion to our zeal and enthusiasm and stick-to-itiveness. If you will pardon the injection of a personal note at this time, let me say that I've been in bed 5 of the last 7 months, and my strength hasn't returned as I'd like, so my remarks will of necessity be very brief. But there are 2 or 3 things that flashed into my mind on which it would be fitting to lay a little emphasis. One is the simplicity of our program. Let's not louse it all up with Freudian complexes and things that are interesting to the scientific mind but have very little to do with our actual AA work. Our 12 steps, when simmered down to the last, resolve themselves into the words love and service. We understand what love is, and we understand what service is. So let's bear those 2 things in mind. Let us also remember to guard that erring member of the tongue. And if we must use it, let's use it with kindness and consideration and tolerance. And one more thing, none of us would be here today if somebody hadn't taken time to explain things to us, to give us a little pat on the back, to take us to a meeting or two, to have done numerous little kinds and thoughtful acts in our behalf. So let us never get the degree of smug complacency so that we're not willing to extend or attempt to that help that has been so beneficial to us to our less fortunate brothers. Thank you very much.
As Alcoholics Anonymous grew, its founders knew that the fellowship would be sustained largely by traditions that had developed over the years. Here is Bill, back in 1951, discussing some of them with characteristic good humor and wisdom, particularly the anonymous part of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Like shoemakers, we had better stick to our last. So that much is decided. We are also certain that as much as we quarrel about things that don't matter too much, we may never quarrel about religion, politics, or reform. Because those are the issues that are dividing the modern world. And thank God, ever since this thing began, I haven't heard a really angry religious or political argument. So it must always be with us, or else we may really perish one day. And then we've developed very strange ideas about public relations. You and I love this good old American tradition. You and I love to stand before statues of Lee, Lincoln, Washington. We revere those people. That's not a bad trait in us. But in late years, this country is really carrying that a little far, perhaps. Today, everything in America is transacted on big names. Big ballyhoo. Big personal publicity. Strutting public characters. And sometimes strutting public villains. Now, we know that for a society like ours, such things cannot be. For us, weak people that we still are, that would be the road to ruin. So, we are firmly convinced that all of us, every one, should be personally anonymous at the general public level, meaning by that the level of the press, the radio, the television, and motion pictures, so that we don't create those public figures, so that we have a standing guarantee that with us, principle shall always come ahead of personality. And that very policy of anonymity at the public level, I dare say, has brought this society millions of words of freely given publicity, which has carried this message to others. Every reporter who enters here knows that no one wants anything personal. He is pleasantly refreshed that here is a society which indeed does really place principles before people, and anonymity is the guarantor of that. Indeed, I am beginning to fear that the reputation of this society is far better than its actual character, but we don't tell the reporters that.
Dr. Bob may best be remembered by the title Bill gave him, the Prince of 12th Steppers. By this, Bill meant Bob's extraordinary efforts for many years helping alcoholics on a personal basis to achieve sobriety, in addition to his own medical practice. In Detroit, in 1948, Bob reflected upon the necessity of this service in maintaining his own recovery from alcoholism, and upon the true meaning of giving of one's self in Alcoholics Anonymous.
I said I was quite human. And I get to thinking every once in a while, well, here's this Smith guy, he's a fairly smart individual. He's got this liquor situation right by the tail, proved it, demonstrated it, and had a drink for 15 years. Probably could knock off a couple, and no one would be the wiser. No, I'm not trying to be funny at all, because those thoughts actually enter my mind. And I know just the minute they do exactly what has happened. You see, there in Akron, we have the extreme good fortune, as a great many of you people know, of having a very nice hospital set up at St. Thomas Hospital. With a ward that theoretically accommodates 7, but consists weekday fees, but it stretched a little bit, and she usually has about 2 or 3 more parked around somewhere. And almost invariably, I find that I haven't been paying quite so much attention to the boys in the ward as I should. Just as sure as that idea that I could probably polish off a couple enters my mind, I think, how about the boys in the ward? You've been giving them the semi-brush off here for a few days. You better get back on the job, big boy, before you get into trouble. And I pat her right back and am much more attentive than I had been in the days preceding the time that I got this funny idea. But I get it, and I get it every once in a while, and I'll probably continue to get it as long or whenever I get careless about that one thing. You know, back in those early days about which I spoke, before we had the 12 steps, we did have some other things besides the actual the biblical verses. That was. I was getting to thinking more of Smith than I was the ward. Otherwise, I wouldn't have neglected him. And I wasn't being especially loving when these fellows had come there, indicating their desire for help, and I was just a little too busy to give them any, or at least very much, of my time. Don't want to be bothered with the bird. 10 cents to get rid of him, well, that's easy. You could even stand 2 bits. But not because you love the fellow, but just to be relieved of the nuisance of his hanging on your coat sleeve or what have you. No unselfishness, no love indicated in the transaction at all. But I think that the thing that really counts is really giving a service of yourself, and that almost invariably, not always, but almost invariably requires some effort and some time of your own. It isn't a matter of putting a little quiet money in the dish. That helps, and possibly that's indicated too. But that isn't giving much. That is for the average individual in days like this when most people get along at least fairly well. That type of giving I don't believe would ever keep anyone sober or anywhere near it. But giving of his own effort and strength and time is quite a different matter. And I think that's what Bill learned in New York that I didn't get in Akron.
In closing the same talk, Dr. Bob had occasion to reflect upon how his own happiness and peace of mind were related to the spiritual side of AA's traditions. Then he turned to the future of the fellowship from his own perspective at the time.
You know, it doesn't make much difference whether a person is drinking or whether they're sober as far as their ultimate aim is concerned. Whether they're drinking liquor or whether they're not, they're still after the same thing, and that's happiness and peace of mind. I harp about that a great deal because that's what we're all after, and we're all after all the time. We want those 2 things. We want happiness, and we want peace of mind. The trouble with us fellows was that we thought we could demand that the world give us happiness in just a particular way in which we wanted to get it, which happened to be by the alcohol route. And we weren't overly successful. But when we take time to find out and familiarize ourselves with and put into practice some of the spiritual laws which it is necessary to follow to acquire those things, then we find that we get them. And I think I've had them in very large measure. Those two things, happiness and peace of mind. And I feel most extremely fortunate, and I feel very grateful and thankful that our Heavenly Father has seen fit that I enjoy them. They're there. Anybody can get them who wishes to, but there do seem to be some rules of the game that we have to follow. But they're here and open and free to everyone who wishes to take advantage of them. And by taking advantage of them means a familiarization with them and putting them in practice and incorporating them in our own thinking and action, and we're bound and determined to get certain results if we do. As I said, it is a very great source of pleasure and gratitude to me to feel that maybe I kicked in my 2 bits worth toward starting this. But as I said also, I feel that I was simply used as God's agent. The question might arise, well, we know what AA's done in the last 13 years, but how about it from here on? Where do we go from here? Our membership, I think, is conservatively estimated at present around 70,000. Will it be in the increase from here on? Well, that'll depend on every member of AA. It is possible for us to do so or not as we elect. If we fight shy of what the politicos call entangling alliances, if we avoid getting messed up with controversial issues such as religious and political issues, wet and dry problems, and so forth, if we have no unity through our central office, if we remember the simplicity of our program, if we continue to remember that our job is to get sober and to stay sober and to help our less fortunate brother in doing the same thing, I doubt very much if we shall have any trouble, and we shall continue to grow and thrive and prosper.
Dr. Bob mentions 70,000 AAs in 1948. In 1963, when Bill made the following comments at a dinner in New York City, his guess of 300,000 to 500,000 was probably accurate. But Bill did not live to see Alcoholics Anonymous grow to a membership of roughly 1 million worldwide in 92 countries. The words you will now hear center upon Bill's deep concerns regarding the heritage that all AAs share and his confidence that it will be maintained in the years to come.
So, years ago, I remember we used to liken the growing AA to an ever-expanding cathedral, which might one day assume an almost infinite dimension. And as we look at this symbol today, we see on the great floor of that cathedral 300,000 of us odd, maybe 500,000, standing in security.
united by the love of each other and the love of God. We who are a little older than most of you here in AA saw the side walls go up and saw them buttressed with the 12 traditions. We saw the spire of service mount higher and higher, so that today it can be seen in 60 countries, ever beckoning to suffer no more. Now this edifice is our inheritance. It is a trust. Under God's grace, I know that you and all to come will maintain it in all its wonder. That loving hands will attend to its growth beyond any imagination. So there it is, folks. It's yours to have and to hold for so long as God may wish AA